Hello and welcome to the SCN webinar on waivers for USDA school meal programs and off-site feeding options. We are glad that you could join us today. The purpose of today's webinar is to discuss meal service operations when schools reopen. Today's presentation will be recorded and available on SponsorNet for viewing. Written responses to questions will also be available. We will answer previously submitted questions, as well as take questions at various points throughout the presentation. It is important that you submit your questions through the Q&A, and that is available on your screen. Please include your full name and district with your question. Here is a look at that screen, and please take a moment to enter your information if you haven't already. Now, I would like to introduce our director, Lauren Moore, for a few program updates.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Katie. I appreciate you all taking the time for this extremely important discussion, even though I know there are a lot of competing interests for your time right now. First, I just want to briefly give an update on the positive impact that your child nutrition programs have had for Kentucky's children and families since March. The Pandemic Electronic Benefits Program up to this point has provided over $165 million to over 530,000 students in Kentucky, and this application will remain open on the Benefind website until the end of August. We still have 20 districts continuing to participate in the Baylor University Emergency Meals to You program, and that program will continue until August 15th. Of course, we have summer meal programs continuing in many of our districts throughout the state. And finally, 88% of our National School Lunch Program sponsors have at least some level of participation in the Community Eligibility Program, or CEP, with 76% of those sponsors having full participation. Districts who are eligible but aren't currently participating have until August 31st to elect to participate for the upcoming school year. So just a reminder about that. Next slide, please. As you know, SCN released guidance on June 22nd that related to feeding your students in the school building. Very shortly after that release, the USDA released the waivers that we will be discussing today. Next week on Monday, July 27th, SCN will be releasing another reopening guidance document that will focus on the information that we're discussing today. That document will also be on an upcoming superintendent webinar, likely the one that will be held Tuesday, July 28th. And I know there is a lot of uncertainty surrounding the reopening of schools, and because of that uncertainty, planning is very challenging. With that in mind, I want to say that the information we will be discussing today is current as of today, but since we have such an evolving situation, guidance we receive and in turn share with you all is definitely subject to change. We will, of course, continue to keep you informed of new information as quickly as we can when we receive it. I want to thank you all for your continued work throughout this time. It has certainly put a heightened emphasis on the important work that you all know you do each and every day. And of course, we know the importance of the work that you do, but it's really spotlighted this work over the last few months. And last but not least, I want to thank our team here at SCN who continue to work so hard to provide timely information and support to you all. I can't say how much I've relied on them during the last few months, and know I will continue to do so moving forward. They are an exceptional group, and again, I just appreciate what you all are doing. And I will turn this back over to Katie, but I will definitely be here throughout most of the presentation to assist with questions as needed.
Thank you so much. Today's presentation will focus on meal services provided to students who are receiving non-traditional instruction due to COVID-19. For information on In the Building meal service, please reference the previous SCN webinar for June 23rd. So let's begin by answering the main question: which program will I be operating? For planned school day meals served in the school building or for students receiving non-traditional instruction due to COVID-19, you will be using the National School Lunch and School Breakfast programs for meal service. In the instance of a planned school closure where no instruction is taking place for students, meal services will not be available through the child nutrition programs. The next question is, in the event there's an unanticipated school closure, can you provide meal service through SFSP or SSO? We cannot provide an answer at this time. We are seeking guidance from USDA, and we are very aware that you need an answer to that. But just to reiterate, the child nutrition program that will be used for school meals provided to students in the school building, as well as those receiving non-traditional instruction due to COVID-19, will be an SLP. It's important to understand that while the nationwide waivers provide flexibility to serve meals to enrolled students outside of the traditional school setting, the waivers do not allow schools to serve meals as they did in the spring. Unless specifically addressed in guidance, the program requirements of the National School Lunch and School Breakfast programs apply to meals served to enrolled students receiving instruction due to COVID-19 on NTI days. So, the first of these requirements is eligibility and access. We've been asked several times if schools are required to provide access to students participating in NTI. At this point, we cannot provide an answer for that question and again are consulting with USDA. However, if you are providing meal service to students participating in NTI, you must provide access to all students regardless of their eligibility status. For example, it would not be acceptable to only provide meals to free status students in order to avoid having to receive payments for meals from reduced and paid students. Also, enrolled students cannot be required to receive a meal. Just as you would in the school building, you cannot force a student to take a meal in the CEP program. SFAs will need to implement a system in which all enrolled students will have access to meals regardless of their eligibility status. Establish specific district policies for the handling of money or cash, if necessary, and communicate that information to households. Ensuring access does not mean that you have to meet the expectation of providing meal delivery services for all students, but it does mean that if a child needs a meal, there's a way for them to get it. Meal counting and claiming requirements will need to be reflective of each school or feeding site. Traditional schools will claim the meals that they serve to enrolled students according to the individual eligibility status of the student receiving the meals. CEP schools will claim the meals served to their enrolled students by applying the approved claiming percentages for the total number of meals served for each type. Meals are counted for claiming at the time they are distributed and are recorded in the school's records as served for the day or days in which the meals were provided. For example, if AAA school sends 2 days of breakfast and lunch meals home with a student on September 15th for consumption on NTI days scheduled for the 16th and 17th, the school would record in their meal count records that the student received 1 breakfast and 1 lunch meal on the 16th and 1 breakfast and 1 lunch meal on the 17th. Finally, districts that use a centralized location in which meals are distributed to students from multiple schools must have a system in place to count the meals served to the students at their enrolled school. Lastly, we are very aware of the need for additional flexibilities. SCN is in the process of submitting state waivers. Each waiver will be made public upon submission for USDA approval, and they can be found on the KDE website. Now, I'm going to hand it over to Sandy Wagner to discuss program meals.
Thank you, Katie. You'll need to consider how you're going to be serving your NTI days and take all possible issues into consideration. Next slide, please. Each enrolled student may only be served 1 breakfast and 1 lunch each day. You may send multiple meals home for NTI days if you have opted into the non-congregate and mealtime waivers. All meals must contain all the required components and meet all meal pattern requirements. The meals can be unitized or they can be in the form of bulk foods. A unitized meal would contain all the components for an entire meal. This could be a grab and go or delivered to your students. Could also be used for parent pickup if you've applied for the parent pickup waiver. Remember, unitized meals must contain all full components. An example for a breakfast would be a cup of fluid milk, a cup of fruit, a 1-ounce cheese stick, and a 1 ounce of whole grain cereal, making it a complete meal of all the components. Bulk food is an amount that would be for more than just a single meal, like a quart of milk or a loaf of bread. Bulk meals, when sent home, should include information telling how the food items contribute to a meal for each child for each day, including how they credit toward the meal pattern, and bulk foods, when sent home, should include preparation and food safety information. An example of a bulk food would be a quart of milk that would provide 4 8-ounce servings. I want to stress the difference. If you are sending multiple unitized meals home, that is not the same as bulk food. Remember that your meals must be planned for the appropriate age grade group, even if you are using a central location to distribute the meals. You must provide reasonable accommodations for children with disabilities. Production records must be maintained. When multiple days meals are provided at the same time, you can use multiple production records, or you can use all on one, and we are actually working right now on our template to make it so that it'll work for multiple days on one production record. Your production records must indicate the total number of meals produced and served, and you must keep documentation, as always, in accordance with the regulations, things like your labels, recipes, and that kind of thing. Right now, if you have any questions that you'd like to send in, you can do that right now. And while you're doing that, I'm going to read a few questions that were sent in ahead of time regarding meals. First one, what guidance can be given regarding meal preparation, production records, and meal counting and claiming for bulk meal distribution? There are many ways this could be structured. Before I answered this, I wanted to give a shout out to, we have 2 new employees that have joined us this summer, and they have been doing an outstanding job working on this subject. And it's Lindsay Crumby and Rebecca Shepard Smith, and they have been working with me, and they have come up with some menus that we're going to be publishing next week that give you menu ideas for many different situations. Rebecca has some incredible tip sheets on how to use the foods and to produce things in such a way for saving money, for saving time, for not doing double duty, for saving for the next day. She's got some recipes, and Lindsay has put this together in a really awesome presentation that I think you guys are really going to like, and that'll be coming out next week. And as I said before, we're also working on the production records that could be used for multiple unitized meals being sent home at one time. Another question, can commingling of preschool be achieved if they are commingled with the other grades when they go through the line, but they are eating in their respective classrooms due to social distancing? Yes, if they are being served in the same line, that would qualify as commingling, but I'm not sure if anyone would actually be doing this year, and I think you need to prepare that you're going to be serving the pre-K menu. And remember, everything with the pre-K is a minimum, and the difference isn't have to be that great between preschool and the K through 5 menu. Not the fluid milk, not the 2 juice. It is a bigger difference at breakfast, but we are going to put out some menus to help you with that also. Will production records for NTI students and in-person learning need to be kept separate if there are different foods being served? They can be on one production record, the same as if you'd had 2 lines in your cafeteria, or they could be separate. That would be up to you, whichever works best for you. Will districts be able to do OVS if they want to in order to decrease costs? Yes, you could do that. And some ideas and suggestions that have come in are signage in the pickup lines that might give choices of things like maybe the fruit, vegetables, milk, to decline those components. You could send something to the classrooms for the kids to fill out, maybe have a Google form. There are ways that you could try to implement offer versus serve to save on waste. Can districts apply for a waiver to offer the maximum minimal serving, which would be the 9 through 12 age group, so that one meal / menu could be served for all age grade groups? Any requests for meal pattern waivers must be targeted and justified based on the SFA's current situation. Each request will be determined on a case-by-case basis. Any flexibilities approved will only be granted for a duration that covers the period of time that has demonstrated the need for the flexibility. The overall impact of the nutritional quality of the meals will be considered when processing meal pattern flexibility request. Documentation provided by the SFA's individual meal pattern flexibility request must be sufficient in justifying an approval. And this is available on our Google Docs. And I would say a suggestion that I would have for this, I understand that it's going to be difficult using a central location, would be perhaps to have your meals bagged up as a K through 8, and then when it is a 9 through 12 child, you could add that extra fruit, and even just a few days a week, you could add the something extra that would take care of those extra calories for the difference in the meal patterns. Have we had any more questions come in, Faith? Or is Jennifer's running that?
Yeah, we have several questions.
Oh.
So the first question is that they would like you to go over again what the difference is between bulk meals and giving 5 days worth of unitized meals.
If you're doing unitized meals, I'm assuming that you are like making the sandwich, or you have the nuggets, you have individual amounts of, apples or bagged carrots, that kind of thing, and you're putting them together and they're making a meal. And I understand you might be serving 5 of those, so all the carrots might, not be in one box. But the bulk food would be that you are sending a pound of ham, a loaf of bread, a bag, a head of lettuce, a quart of milk, that kind of thing, that then is going to be turned into a meal at home.
Okay, Katie, the next question would be about the program integrity, and they would like to know if they can use tally sheets to count breakfast and lunch meals.
When providing meal service to students who are receiving non-traditional instruction, you will not be able to use tally sheets in that setting, because you need to be able to guard against students receiving duplicate meals. And with a tally sheet, there's no way that you can prevent that and know which student had received a meal and which student hadn't. However, in speaking to meal service in the classroom setting, in the building setting, yes, it is permissible to use tally sheets then. However, you still need to ensure that there are internal controls to make sure that you don't provide second duplicated meals to students.
Okay, the next question wants to know, is it necessary for the menu for NTI meals to match the menu that is served at school for those, I'm assuming, that are in person on the same day?
No, it wouldn't be necessary. Probably wouldn't even be practical. If you don't, the main thing you need to be keeping an eye on is that you're following the meal pattern, and the vegetable subgroups obviously is an issue. If you have kids that are home the whole week and some that are in school the whole week, they can be served different menus. Just make sure you're covering all of your bases on each of those menus.
Okay, and the next question says that we are allowing the parents and students to select either coming to school or staying at home with virtual instruction. And they would like clarification to know if they must provide meals or offer meals to those that choose to stay home.
Again, at this point, that is a question that we have sent to USDA to provide a response. We cannot provide an answer on if you are required to provide meal service through or to students who are receiving instruction through NTI. However, if you do choose to provide meal service to students who are receiving NTI, you must provide meal service to all of those students.
Okay, and the next question asks, can students pick up meals at any school in the district, or do they have to go to the school where they are enrolled?
I can take this one. And Faith will discuss this in the next section as well. It is permissible to have a centralized distribution point. However, the meals for those students you will need to tie it back to the eligible student, and the meal counts will roll back to the enrolled school that they attend, and the meals must meet the meal pattern for that specific student's age grade group.
Okay, and the next question is concerning the meal pattern, and they want to know if you have to meet the vegetable subgroups for the meals that are served to the NTI students.
Yes, you do need to meet all the meal pattern requirements, including the vegetable subgroups. As I said, we are putting out some menus that Rebecca and Lindsay have helped with, and they do give some good ideas for meeting those. There are meal pattern waivers that we will look at on a case-by-case basis if you can come up with justification.
Okay, and the next question, they would like some clarification. It says our district is using virtual learning for select students. Is that what you are referring to as NTI? Should students who are only virtual learners be provided meals 5 days each week?
To clarify the difference between virtual learners and non-traditional instruction, non-traditional instruction for students is that they are receiving instruction in the non-school building setting, and they are receiving that instruction due to COVID, due to the family made a decision not to come back to school due to safety and health concerns. So that is what we are calling instruction, non-traditional instruction due to COVID. I think a lot of districts are using that term virtual learning interchangeably with that definition. However, there are some students that would never be in the school building and would never have had access to a school meal program. So those students would not fall within that same category. The students that we are focusing on are students that are receiving instruction at home due to COVID because there's a safety concern about them being in the building, therefore they're losing their access to meal service.
Okay, so we have other questions, but they will either be covered in another section or are duplicates.
So now we're going to review the waivers and alternate meal service models that can be used for school year 2020-2021. So USDA has issued nationwide waivers of program requirements for school year 2021. These waivers provide flexibility to select program requirements of the National School Lunch Program and School Breakfast Program, which will enable schools to provide meals to enrolled students attending in person or a non-traditional instruction. Meals may be served to enrolled students on days instruction occurs. This may be in person or on non-traditional instruction days. So the first waiver that we're going to talk about is the non-congregate feeding waiver. This waives the requirements of NSLP and SBP meals to be served in a congregate setting and consumed by the participants on site. This waiver allows for schools to serve meals to their enrolled students who are receiving alternate instruction, such as virtual or with the packets, due to COVID-19 on NTI days. The second waiver that we're going to talk about is the mealtime waiver. This waiver allows for breakfast and lunch meals to be served outside of the time period requirements. It enables schools to provide meals at a time to enrolled students who are receiving instruction due to COVID-19 on NTI days. The meal service times can be adjusted during the day in the building to allow more time for meal service. All meal times for feeding that occurs in the school building must be updated in the CNIPS application. Schools are required to notify SCN of their desire to implement the above waivers. The waiver requests are submitted using the Google form, and information with the link to submit a waiver request can be found in the weekly email from Lauren Moore on July 13, 2020, and this information can also be found on SponsorNet. The parent-guardian pickup waiver allows schools to count meals for reimbursement when they are picked up by the parent or guardian of an enrolled student. Schools are required to request approval for use of this waiver. SCN will review and approve procedures to ensure compliance. The request will be submitted using a Google form. The request must provide a description of how it will be ensured that meals are provided to an enrolled student's parent or guardian picking up the meal. And the request must also provide a description of the meal counting process used to ensure that duplicated meals are not provided. Again, information with the link to submit a waiver request can be found in the weekly email that is dated July 13th, 2020, and the information can also be found on SponsorNet. So some examples of internal controls to ensure duplicate meals are not served could be student information is immediately entered into the POS as the meal is served using the student lunch number or a barcode or their name. Only one site is available for pickup and a hard copy roster is used. Then the meals are entered into the POS. Pickup sites are at the student's enrolled school and a hard copy roster is used. If using this option, the parent or guardian with multiple children at different schools would have to visit each specific site. Another example could be an online roster, such as a Google Sheet that is live, and each pickup site can use it at the same time. Please remember that any meal count that is taken outside of the POS must be entered into the POS before the next meal service to ensure a second meal is not served. Examples of processes to ensure that the parent or guardian of an enrolled student picks up the meals could be the parent or guardian provides a photo ID and the staff cross-references Infinite Campus to verify. The parent or guardian shows student information using IC Parent Portal on their mobile device. Other apps that include student information that would only have parent or guardian access could be such as Class Dojo, PBIS, the parent or guardian identifier used by the district, such as a pickup tag in their window. And then the district could also do a list of parent or guardian names created by the food service using Google, and the parent or guardian could submit that information of eligible people that could pick up the meals, and food service could use that list. The offer versus serve waiver for senior high schools allows schools to unitize meals that are served to high school age students. Schools are required to notify SCN of their desire to implement this waiver. Requests can be made using the Google form waiver request, and that information with the link can be found in the weekly email on July 13th, and this information can also be found on SponsorNet. The meal pattern flexibility waiver allows state agencies to approve schools to serve meals that do not meet meal pattern requirements due to COVID-19. On the waiver request, you must describe in detail the meal pattern component you're requesting to be waived and your justification for the hardship that you've encountered. Schools are required to notify SCN of their desire to implement this waiver. And again, this is using a Google form. It can be found in the weekly email on July 13th or also on SponsorNet. Now we will discuss the meal service models that can be used for NTI instruction. There are multiple meal service models that schools can operate when using the non-congregate and meal service time waivers, such as meal pickup services, sending meals home with students, meal delivery to bus stops or households. When using the meal pickup service method, meals are picked up at the school and taken home by the parent or guardian or provided directly to the student. Schools must have a method to count the meals by individual student, collect payments when applicable, and include internal control processes that would prevent duplicate meals from being provided. Schools should use meal distribution strategies that maintain social distancing. Food safety and sanitation SOPs for cleaning and sanitizing should be followed by all staff when distributing meals. And parent or guardians and/or students should be reminded not to come to the meal distribution sites if they are sick. The next method is sending meals home with students. Using this method, schools would provide meals to students during in-person instruction to take home for consumption the following day or days during non-traditional instruction. Schools must have a method to count meals by individual student, collect payments when applicable, and include internal control processes that would prevent duplicate meals being provided. The served meal must be accounted for on the day it was intended for consumption. For example, Tuesday's meal is given to a student as they exit the bus on Monday afternoon. The breakfast and/or lunch would be counted on Tuesday's meal counts because that is the day it was intended for consumption. Program operators must also take food safety into consideration when planning menus that would be transported home by students. The meal delivery service method is where schools deliver meals and serve at bus stops, or meals are delivered directly to the household. Delivering meals directly to households requires schools to obtain written permission from the household prior to delivering the meal. Processes to count the meals served to individual students must be implemented and marked when the meals are provided. So now we're going to open it back up for questions if you have any about the waivers or meal service models. And while you're submitting those, I'm going to read over a few that were already submitted before the webinar. One of the questions is, if we give meals for the next day, does the count go on the day given or the day the meal is for? And the answer is the meal count would be counted on the next day that the meal was intended for. When delivering meals to the classroom, do I count each classroom as a point of service? Yes, if delivering meals to the classroom, each classroom would be counted as a point of service. Do the existing waivers in place provide us with the flexibility to deliver meals to students via buses and/or through the Frisky networks to ensure that all students have access? Is this implicit in the non-congregate and parent-guardian pickup waivers? Delivering meals to students through buses and/or through the Frisky networks is allowable as long as the meals are only distributed to enrolled students and the meal counts are attached to an individual child. When meals are delivered directly to households, the school must obtain written permission prior to delivering the meals. Here's another question about tally sheets. Can tally sheets be utilized to keep a daily total of the meals served? And if so, can one per week per meal type be used with a date range? So tally sheets will only be approved for use when meals are served in the building to students receiving in-person instruction. SEN must approve the use of tally sheets before they are approved. And in that situation, it would be daily use of tally sheets. Is KDE requiring districts to have parents order or request meals prior to service? Pre-ordering is not a requirement. It is suggested that schools have some method in place to forecast the number of meals that need to be prepared, and asking households to pre-order could be one of those methods depending on the meal service model that you will be using. So Jennifer, do we have any questions?
We do. So there is a couple of questions wanting some clarification, and they want to make sure that they heard correctly that they are allowed to feed their students who are enrolled in their schools regardless of how they are receiving instruction, whether in person or through a non-traditional instruction.
Yes. They can feed students that are both in person and at home or another location outside of school, they will need to make sure that they apply for the non-congregate waiver to cover those students that aren't in the school building. They also need to apply for the meal service time waiver because the times may vary. Then if parents are going to pick up meals, they may also need to apply for that waiver.
All right, let's see. Let's see. There is a question saying, if we are doing in-person and virtual learning, do we need to fill out the waiver for the parent pickup for the virtual? So I guess they're looking for clarification on when they would need the parent pickup waiver and when they would not.
So if you are going to have parents pick up the meals for the virtual students, you would need to fill out the parent pickup waiver. If you're going to pass out meals somehow to the student, like at the end of the school day before they go home and use virtual learning, then you would need the non-congregate waiver.
Okay. Another question that is being asked is how they could monitor that parents are not picking up meals at more than one site.
So that depends upon the program that the district has and the capabilities that it has. Of course, using the POS and entering in the meal immediately would be the best option, but if that's not available, you would need to look at if you need to use hard copy rosters. Can you only open one site to keep duplicate meals from being served? Do you want to make the parents go to each enrolled school so that you can use a hard copy? I mentioned the Google Sheets so that it was live, if you could do something like that. Again, the POS would be the easiest, but those are just some of the examples that we've heard about and seen, and Kim and Allie are currently approving those waivers. So we are open if there's another idea that we're not thinking about that would work. We're open to looking at those as well.
Okay, and this one looks like it's about the waiver submission. And it says, I have submitted waivers and received an email saying it had been received. How do I know if I'm approved?
So if you apply for the one request, there were 3 waivers on one request, and those 3 waivers were the non-congregate, the meal service time, and the OVS. That should have sent you an email after you submitted with your approval. If you submitted a parent pickup or a meal pattern flexibility, those have been submitted to us and we are currently reviewing. Once we have reviewed that and decided if it's approved or denied, you will receive an email with the approval or denial letter attached along with the request that it goes with. And then that consultant will also upload both of those documents into your CNIPS application.
Okay, and then we had several asking to repeat the answer to Amy Collins' question. And Amy Collins' question was the question saying that clarification on what's being referred to as NTI and virtual learning.
So NTI is any type of alternate instruction outside of the school building for an enrolled student. So that could be online-based instruction that the school district is providing. That could be the packets that students are receiving because they can't do the virtual learning. It's anything that's an alternate to the in-person that the school district is providing. I hope that helped.
Okay, I'm looking back through here.
And I'll go back to that question for a second. You may check with you if your school district is doing some type of virtual learning with another company and you're unsure. That is a question that you could always go back to your central office with to make sure that the child is an enrolled student of the district. I have seen some schools doing that.
Okay. And we have one question. Do you have to apply for all the waivers or just the meal pattern flexibility?
So you will need to apply for the waivers that you will be using in your situation. If you don't plan on parents picking up meals, then there is no reason to apply for the parent pickup waiver. And if the meal pattern flexibility is the only one you're going to use, then you can apply for that one. And you can apply for the others later if your circumstances change.
Okay, and this is a question of, if I apply for a waiver and then decide not to use it, would that still be okay?
That's okay. You're still approved based on the timeline that you were given in the approval letter. And you would just have that on file. For instance, if you have an administrative review coming up, we could go back and look at that if you were using it, just to see that you were approved.
Okay. And this isn't necessarily with the meals, well, sort of with the meal services. If the entire school goes NTI, can we do emergency feeding? So I guess they're asking, do we still have to do national school lunch if it's only virtual instruction?
I can answer that one.
Okay.
Yes, you will be using the National School Lunch Program for all instruction through NTI.
Okay. Let me go back through here. If the district does home delivery every day, which method is best to claim meals? Using rosters, etc. And do we claim on that day, for example, if we deliver tomorrow's breakfast with today's lunch, on which day are those claimed?
So you would claim the meal on the day it was intended for the students to eat the meal. So if you were delivering meals today and you served a lunch that was intended to be eaten today, then the meal count would go down on 7/23. If the breakfast is for the next morning, you would mark the meal count on 7/24 for the breakfast. Can you repeat the other part of the question?
Yes. Get back up to it.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
I think it was the best method used for delivery.
Okay, so they wanted to know, oh, so they wanted clarification on the best method to use for recording the meal. Like, for example, would a roster be the best method?
Whatever method that you can use to ensure a duplicated meal is not served. So if you have no other delivery going on and that is the only one, then in that case, a hard copy roster probably could be used. But if you have parent pickup and delivery going on at the same time, it would be difficult to use a hard copy roster.
Okay.
And that's where I did a little research. If you'll check with your POS system, I don't know if it's available, but maybe you could find barcodes, QR scanners that you could possibly use your cell phone to scan that would go back to your POS if you were doing something mobile like a delivery. But again, that goes back to your POS system and if that can happen.
Okay, and we've got one more request for a clarification that can NTI days include weather days or only COVID?
At this point in time, I think that's referencing back to the unanticipated school closure. If your district is utilizing non-traditional instruction and students are out of the building, but it's still counting as a school day with non-traditional instruction, you will use the National School Lunch Program. There are questions about if the school has an unanticipated closure due to weather, and we are seeking clarification on program use, which child nutrition program to use in that situation. We know that you guys need answers to that question. So we'll let you know as soon as we find out from USDA.
Okay. And then we've got a couple of questions asking about the meal pattern waivers. and wanting to know if requests can be approved for anything other than supply and distribution issues.
Yeah, we will be able to approve waivers other than just for availability, but we will be taking into consideration the integrity and nutritional value of the meals. But we will look at other than just availability.
And then we have a question about where they go to apply for these waivers. Do they go into SponsorNet?
The information can be found on the SponsorNet page. And then there's also a link to the guidance that has the request links in it in the weekly email from Lauren on, let me look it back up. The email was sent on July 13th, 2020.
Okay. And I think that's it for now.
Okay.
Oh, and that's me. I'm too busy scrolling to make sure I got everybody. So what do you need to do? What are your next steps? First, you need to identify how your district is reopening. Will you provide all in-person instruction, or will you use any non-traditional instruction? Second, you want to make sure that you create a meal service plan. Evaluate if any waivers are going to be necessary to implement your meal services, and ensure that all stakeholders are aware of and support your plan. And then third, you want to contact or notify us. So we must be notified of using a waiver using those Google form processes. The meal pattern and parent pickup waivers do require submission of procedures and justification, which we will review and approve. And then finally, we're going to get into updating your CNIPS application. So in your CNIPS application, those site applications will need to reflect the meal service methods and procedures that you're going to be using for in-school meal services only. So if you are using the grades 9 through 12 offer versus serve waiver for meal services during in-school instruction, you'll just need to go into your site applications in CNIPS and identify that in those site applications that they will not be using offer versus serve. If you're going to be using the offer versus serve waiver for NTI meals only and not while students are in the building, you don't need to update that section of your application. We will be collecting your NTI meal service operational procedures via form submission through CNIPS starting sometime in August. We know that you all need some plans to, some time to get your plans established, and you may start with something and have to make some tweaks and changes. So that gives you a little bit of time to figure out what's working for you and what you're going to be doing. And the purpose for collecting this information is to ensure that all aspects of meal services are represented in your CNIPS application. Okay. So we do have some questions dealing with CNIPS that we got and next steps. Let's see. Now, this is dealing with in-person seating. Just says we have discussed purchasing plexiglass barriers for cafeteria tables. Are those acceptable with our meal service guidelines? It sounds like they're wanting to use those plexiglasses in lieu of social distancing, so we would recommend that you consult with your local health department to determine if that's going to be acceptable or not. Let's see. We are planning to serve a hot meal and a cold meal selection to our K through 8 students. They can choose which meal, but we still want to serve them all components. And they want to know if they need to change their application to reflect that. If we go back to school normally before the end of the school year, we would like to return to offer versus serve. So I'm assuming that this is also for in-school meal services, and you are able to serve all meals to students. You don't have to implement offer versus serve since we have that OVS waiver for lunch at the 9 through 12 grades. And you can update your application whenever you decide to return to using OVS in your meal services. So that's always something that can be updated and reapproved. Let's see. and I think we answered this question, but what federal programs will we operate under if and when we have to go to NTI shelter in place as we did in the spring? So the non-congregate mealtime waivers were provided to enable schools to feed students when they're receiving instruction at home through the National School Lunch and School Breakfast program. So as any meal services that will be provided will be through those programs. And it says, here's another question. Talking about in-service training, wanting to know if how they can provide training when they had to cancel their group training for their staff. And there are multiple options available to provide staff training. You can use conference calls, live or pre-recorded webinars, videos, online classes, or even training documents. You can use the comprehensive training module that's on SponsorNet, and you can have them complete that on their own timeline, or the online training modules provided by ICN. Just as a reminder, training does not have to be provided in person in a group setting to count, and it can be provided and it will count towards professional training when it's offered any time throughout the year. It does not all have to be offered at once at the beginning of the school year. And I think that's it of the questions submitted beforehand.
Jennifer, do you mind? This is Lauren. I just want to mention something really quickly. So just a note, since we are getting a lot of questions about the programs that will be administered. So the waivers that came out, the most recent waivers that we've been discussing today, did not apply to the summer programs. They only apply to the National School Lunch, School Breakfast, and CACFP programs. We are well aware that there are many groups advocating for the use of the summer programs, SFSP and SSO, and we realized that those would be much easier for districts to implement. That's why initially at the start of the program, or the start of the webinar, I mentioned that things are changing quickly. And so again, this information that we're providing is what we have currently from the USDA. And at this point, we have no authority to do anything under the other programs. The non-congregate waiver, again, did not apply to SFSP or SSO. We've sent some questions about that because there is some language about the summer programs in the non-congregate waiver that only talks about unanticipated school closure. So we'll get clarification on that. But do know that we are aware of the conversations that are happening, and we will, if anything changes, we'll get that information to you as quickly as we can. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine. Okay. So we do have more questions that have come in. And I'm not sure who this would go to, maybe Katie or Faith. Will we have to collect payments from paid students enrolled in non-CEP schools if they pick up their meals at a CEP site?
Yes, I will take that one.
Okay.
You will need to collect payment in whatever district process that you put in place for that, whether it be an electronic system or accept cash payment. But regardless of where they pick up the meal, it's about where they are enrolled in school. So even if a child picks up a meal at a CEP school, the meal count will be claimed back to their enrolled school where they will have an individual status that will apply. I hope that provided further clarification on that one. And Faith, if you have anything to add, feel free.
No, you said it all. So here's another question. Can you use an enrollment form and mark off after a student or parent picks up the meal? We would ask for more information in that situation if you were to apply for the parent request, because we would need to know, are there multiple sites that parents are able to pick up meals? And if so, how would that enable them from picking up a second meal? So it would depend on the situation, and we would need more information. Is there a form already produced to send to families to give permission to deliver foods to their homes?
I think that is something that we can definitely check around and see if that there is a form out there and provide that if we can find a template.
Here's a question about food safety. If we can't have coolers on buses, could we request to waive the milk component since it might get hot on the bus ride home? And this would be for sending meals home the day before an NTI day.
We will look at food safety issues in regards to waivers. I can't make promises, but we will look at food safety as obviously a potential issue.
Okay. So this is just a clarification from a question earlier. So we can feed any student that is enrolled in our district, regardless of how they are receiving instruction, in person or virtual. And then same would apply if the entire district was extended NTI due to COVID, only feeding the enrolled students through NSLP. So yes, you can feed any student that is enrolled, regardless of how they are receiving instruction. Depending upon how that's going to look in your district, depends upon the waivers that you would need to apply for in each situation. So if we use rosters for home meal deliveries and the drivers don't return in enough time for the POS entry that day, can you enter in the meals the next day? That depends on your POS system. And again, the meals need to be counted on the days they were intended for consumption. So if you can go back into your POS and backdate those meal counts to show up on that day, as long as it covers them not receiving a duplicate meal. So this question, if we apply for the parent pickup waiver with current procedures, then those procedures change, what do we do? If the procedures that you are approved for change, you will need to request another waiver to be approved for the changes in your situation. And you can use the same link, and then we will review that and send you the approval or the denial. Sandy, this is a question about milk. If you opt for serve, the student still has to choose a milk option, correct?
They do, yes.
Okay. So this question, can you reapply if you are denied a waiver? Yes, you can reapply at any time during the waiver period. Right now, I have Kim Wise and Allie McCreary are reviewing the parent pickup waivers, and they will reach out to you either by email or phone call to discuss the denial and what is needed to have an approval in your situation. And we're getting ready to start on the meal pattern flexibilities, and Sandy Wagner, Lindsay Crumby, and Rebecca Smith-Shepard, they'll be reviewing those. So this is a food safety question. So Jennifer, I'm going to direct it towards you. Since we can't have share tables, but a kid tells a cook they do not want an item, would it be okay to remove that item from their bag for that child as if it was a share table?
Well, that would be a form of offer versus serve. So if you want to allow that, you might want to go back to the question of how you might be able to implement offer versus serve with those types of meals and have signage available, letting them know how they can do that.
Okay. Sandy, I'll direct this question to you. Can they pre-order milk if we are delivering to the classroom?
Yes, they would be able to do that.
Okay.
And that would be a way to do offer versus serve too, rather than just serve.
So another question is asking about the waiver period. The waivers that I discussed today are effective until June 30th, 2021. The meal pattern flexibility may be approved on different timelines, but the end of the waivers is June 30th. So a question about parent pickup. If you have told the family to pick up the meal at site A and the family shows up at site B wanting to pick up meals, can you refuse to serve them at site A and tell them to go to the correct site?
I'll take that one.
Okay.
In that instance, I would work with the family and try my best not to refuse the meal. I think you need to keep in mind customer service, and in assisting families that, sometimes there are barriers. That might be limited English proficiency. It might be that they didn't have clear access to information, and try to do everything you possibly can to provide the meal, even if they showed up at a different location. We all know things happen. So you can have an internal workaround where maybe you can make a phone call to a staff at the other location talking about, this is what happened. Can you put this meal count down, or we've got this covered? I think internal communication is key, to work within, just talk and work it out with internal communication and provide the best customer service and flexibility that you can to households.
Do you mind, Katie, do you mind to repeat about the payment? I'm trying to find the question. A paid student enrolled in a non-CEP location, do they have to pay for their meals?
Yes, think about just in general, the way that the regulations are currently. And again, as Lauren said, everything is subject to change because these are all huge barriers and it's all new to us. Everything is new. So, but the current way of thinking within the regulations, the meal, the student goes back to their enrolled school, regardless of where they pick up the meal. So they could pick up a meal at any location, but the meal count and their status will tie back to where they actually are enrolled in what we would refer to often as their home school. So if they pick up a meal at a CEP school, they could not be considered a visiting student because their meal count's going to stick with their home or enrolled school. So you would have to collect payment if they were a paid student or a reduced student. There is the ability to absorb or waive the reduced price fees for students. So that would be an option, a way to make it easier. But you would need to consider where the student is enrolled as their home school for how you're going to count, claim, and collect money from the student.
Okay. Jennifer, I'm going to direct this question to you. Do we submit a new meal counting and claiming procedure during NTI service?
So once you have your meal services down, we're going to be sending out a form for you to pass along your information related to your NTI meals.
So I'll take this question. Do we have a deadline to apply for waivers? Again, you can apply for a waiver at any time until the expiration date of June 30th, 2021. Sandy, I have an OVS question for lunch. How many choices must be available to constitute OVS for lunch?
That's a confusion. Choices are not the same as offer versus serve. You can have offer versus serve and only have one entree. Offer versus serve is allowing them to decline the components. So you could be doing offer versus serve and just have one basic meal, and they're allowed to not take all the fruit or vegetable or whatever it is they want to decline for their two components.
Okay, that's all the questions for now.
Okay, so if there's any last questions, please feel free to enter them into the Q&A and we'll get those. And any questions that were unanswered, we'll be sure to put them in the final Q&A document that we'll publish next week. But we just want to close with a few additional resources and take time for those final questions. Again, we do know this is a time period that there are lots of questions, there are lots of confusing answers, and we just want to support you the best way that we possibly can. And we do understand and are seeking clarification as much as we can to make it as easy as possible for you all to provide meal service to students. Next week on SponsorNet, the food safety page will be live. There's several SOPs to help you out, things like that, so you can utilize those to assist you. The SCN waiver request document is currently available on SponsorNet as well. And so you can have access to all of the waiver links, and we will keep that up the entire year to make sure that you can continuously access those as you need to. And I also want to say with the waivers, I want you all to know that our goal is not to deny. We want to help encourage you and make things possible for you. So if you are denied, you will be contacted by our staff and be given guidance on how to approve. Sometimes we just need things in writing and just a little additional clarification. So just keep that in mind. Also, as Sandy mentioned, next week we have some menu planning resources that are going to be available, and we have sample menus for hybrid methods. So ideas that if you have students in the building Monday and at home on Tuesday, just ways to make that work. We have sample menus for preschool, sample menus for complete NTI, sample menus for completely in school, and just lots of good resources. So we're very excited to put that out and to help assist you all. So are there any final questions or anything that we can answer for you?
Let me read through.
I will say again that we will publish this and it will be available next week on SponsorNet.
So one last question, can our distribution center for meal pickup be somewhere other than schools, such as a library, park, or central office?
Yes, you can have another location as a distribution center. Be sure to let us know so that we can make sure that we note that in your CNIPS application and that all claiming goes appropriately back to the enrolled school. But if that is a convenience for you, and I would also just check with your health department to make sure that all food safety issues are addressed if you're using a site like that.
And then we'll end on this question. What about annual training?
We do have our comprehensive training that is posted on SponsorNet, and you can use that at any point in time. We try to keep that as updated as possible because it's comprehensive. It has everything. And then we will also begin working on additional trainings that we will provide electronically through the fall and throughout the spring. So feel free to let us know if you have topics that you'd like us to cover. And we'll get on that and hope to see you guys in person soon. So if there's anything else, please just let us know and feel free to email your point of contact and we'll be happy to answer questions for you. Thank you for taking the time today and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.